Hey guys, it's Chad Corbett, co-founder, trainer, and wear many other hats here at All the Leads. And this is part of our Ask the Expert series. So if you haven't watched one of these before, be sure to take a look at all the copy below and look for the playlist, the Ask the Expert playlist. Today we have our friend, our all the partners at All the Leads now. I was the last to get to and be introduced to Andy, but back in December, we gave each and every customer a copy of Andy's new book, The Safer Agent. And if you weren't a customer back then, you should go check that book out. Where can they find that on Amazon now, Andy?
It is on Amazon, yes.
Okay, cool. So that was our Christmas gift to everybody. We saw a lot of value in what she's doing for the industry, both for realtors and real estate investors and any professional in the real estate field. So I wanted to pick her brain publicly, and she was nice enough to offer to provide that value to us. She's taken time out. She's actually in the middle of co-teaching a class at a Realtors Association right now. So she was kind enough to offer her time and expertise to you guys. So Andy, welcome to All the Leads.
Thank you. Thank you. So just a little bit about my background. I am a real estate investor. For those of you out there that haven't ever met me before, I've been investing we did our first one 20 years ago. We did our first flip. So I focus more on rental properties now, but we still do flips sometimes too. But I'm also a real estate broker. I owned a mortgage company for several years with my husband. He still works on that side of the industry. And in our other life that we always kind of kept more secret, we're also firearms and self-defense instructors. And a few years ago, somebody came to me and said, Andy, we know you're an instructor in real estate because I've been teaching realtors and real estate investors for over 15 years. They said, we know you're an instructor. We know you have the skills to teach other people, but we also know you have this other part of your life that you don't talk about much. But it's time that you bring that safety knowledge over to the real estate side. Because a lot of people don't realize that the real estate industry in the last 10 years, and I follow the statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this is from our US government. They tally the numbers up. And in the last 10 years, we had 576 in the category of real estate professional deaths on the job.
Wow.
Of those 576, 250 of those were considered the category of assault or attack by another. So in 10 years, there's 250 of them. That's 25 a year. That's 2 a month. And when I ask a room full of realtors, how many have you heard of in the last 10 years? The answer is usually 1 or 2. The real high profile cases, Beverly Carter was in Arkansas a few years back. They made a Dateline episode out of that story. But in 10 years, there were actually 250 of them, but we only heard of 1 or 2.
I was actually on your blog, I don't know when, recently, and I noticed one of your recent blog posts was someone who was arrested for, I think it was a foiled terrorism plot, but he had a list of over 200 realtors' names that he was intending to target. That one went under my radar. I didn't see that. The most recent one I saw was last week. It was during a home showing. It was a buyer's agent, and he had her go through first and hit her with a stun gun as soon as she walked across the threshold. But that was just, a matter of probably 5 or 6 days ago. But yep. I'm in real estate, and I watch real estate news all the time. The average person probably, like you said, they hear maybe 10% of the actual cases.
But even the fact that you follow it and you still haven't heard of that many.
Right.
Because if there's 25 deaths a year from assault, how many unsuccessful or an assault that didn't end in a murder? There's so many, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. We just don't really hear about them.
Yeah.
And that's sad. And it's not just real estate agents. It's also property managers. It's also it's investors. 2 years ago, in fact, I ended up doing a couple of real estate investing podcasts for people right after this. There was a couple that were investors in the Ohio, Kentucky area, and they went to check on one of their evictions. Hey, the house should be empty by now. Let's go by and check on it. And they went by, the tenant who was supposed to be evicted was still there. He shot both of them, and the neighbors saw this happen. They know what happened. He shot both of them, took the bodies away, came back. They arrested him because the neighbor had already called the police, but it was about 3 months before they found one of the investors' bodies, and it was like 8 months before they found the other one. But that was just, I mean, how many times have we done the same thing? Oh, the eviction should be over. Let's stop by on the way home and see if the house is empty.
Sure.
We've all done it.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've only been in really 2 situations where I wasn't sure if I was getting out and I wasn't armed. I'm gonna tell you, I wish I was and certainly in one of them, because it was 6-on-1, and I'm 6'7", 270. So most people aren't going to mess with me, but most people aren't 6'7", 270 either.
Well, I'm 6 foot, so for a lady, I'm not the one they're going to pick either.
Exactly. So we've got the benefit, like we don't necessarily have to go heeled all the time, but for a 5'2", 105-pound female, for somebody who's already in that mindset, they're going to go for, you're going to be an easier target certainly than I would be. So why don't tell us about, like, you started telling the story of how you got into, like, it sounds like more, I guess the world came to you saying, we know that you have this valuable skill set. Can you help us? Like, and you started teaching first, and then that evolved into the book that you eventually wrote. So tell us a little bit about the progression of getting into the industry. And also, I'm really curious, like, what measurable impact have you been able to see since you kind of came into this new space?
It's really hard to measure an impact, because the biggest thing that I teach is how to avoid the situations to start with. 95% of what I teach is different ways to read the land and know that there could be a problem and avoid it. One of my favorite topics we talk a lot about now is body language and reading pre-attack indicators.
Yep.
So it's hard to say, there's been 12 people that were in this situation and this is what they did, because I'm teaching them to cut that situation out of the possibilities earlier and earlier and earlier.
Right.
The minute you get that bad feeling, back out instead of going to the appointment with the potential renter and then having problems. I'm telling them to don't even go on the appointment if something doesn't feel right. So a lot of it is, it's not really a measurable thing. I definitely have gotten texts and Facebook messages from people that said, oh, this weird situation just happened and I remembered what you said, so I did this and everything was fine. So were they really in danger? We don't know. We'll never really know. But I was at a self-defense instructor's class once, and the instructor said, you've already almost been a victim hundreds, maybe even thousands of times in your life.
Yeah.
But you decided to turn left instead of right, so you weren't in the path of where that criminal was waiting for you. There's so many just barelys that we really just don't know. And what I always teach in class is there's no way to be 100% safe. It's just not possible. The minute you walk out your front door, something could happen to you.
Sure.
But sitting on your sofa is not safe either. I mean, we have home invasions too. So there is no way to be 100% safe. What we can show you is all of these different little tips and tricks and techniques that every one that you do makes you a little safer. If you do 2 of them, you're that much safer. If you do 3 of them, you're this much safer. If you do 10 of them, you're this much safer. The more of these things that you implement into your day-to-day lifestyle, the safer it's going to make you. But nothing is 100%, unfortunately.
What would you say, let's just say that the 5 most basic things that every real estate professional should have in place already, and if they don't, it should kind of throw a red flag? Like, whether that's skill set or tangible products or like, what should they be focusing on?
I'd say if there had to be a number one is trust your gut.
Yeah, intuition's strong. We should listen to it more often.
Yeah, all animals have, I call it our built-in alarm system. All animals have it. So, like, for example, if you're listening and you have a dog, if you're out walking the dog around the neighborhood and all of a sudden your dog stops and starts growling and the hair goes up on the back of their neck, and where I live, we have bears. So when we're walking and all of a sudden my dog starts behaving funny and wants to turn around and go back to the house, instead of me saying, oh, you're being silly, let's keep going, what I say is, oh, she has better hearing, smell, and eyesight than me, and she
Right.
wants to turn around and go home. We're turning around and going home. But humans have that alarm system built in too. We are the only animals on the planet that will not only ignore our alarm system, but will try to justify why we ignored it. So I had a bad feeling, but I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to embarrass my friends. I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to maybe not rent my house out today because the potential tenant was giving me weird feelings. I actually spoke once at the Florida Executive Women, and these are all high level. You have to meet a certain income level to even be invited to this organization. And I spoke on safety there. And after it, one of the ladies came up to me and she said, you really need to talk about that gut feelings part more than what you do already. She's an emergency room physician. And she said, every single time we have somebody on our table in the emergency room who's been mugged or raped or assaulted, they say the exact same thing. I had a bad feeling, but, and then they fill in the blanks for what their justification was. So we have to give ourselves permission to follow our alarm system. I follow my dogs, but I won't follow my own. That's kind of silly. Unless we just take our dog with us everywhere, that would work.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I have a
It doesn't
chocolate
work when you're
lab.
going in other people's homes, though.
I have a chocolate lab, and he's been on just about, unless it's over 75 degrees, he's been on just about every real estate appointment I've ever been on. And he's made a difference on a couple, like wholesale appointments that weren't in the best areas of town. By reading the body language, you could see people would go to the other side of the street, and I'll park like in the front yard with the window down where he can clear the glass if I need to call him. And that's been probably the best deterrent that I've ever had was a 100-pound dog. So
Yeah.
So
Mine
number
only
one is
came in half.
listen to your intuition, or hear your intuition, and then listen.
I guess number two, honestly, this would probably stop 90% of the crime that happens out there, is pay attention. I know that sounds so simple, and I should be able to leave $1 million cash on the front seat of my Jeep with the doors off in any neighborhood I want, and it should not be touched. However, that's not the world we live in, and we all know that. So I'm never, ever, ever saying that you deserve to be a victim of crime, because I wish we didn't even need to think about that. However, we don't need to tee it up for them and make it easy. I don't need to paint a big giant red circle on my back that says I'm an easy victim. But when we do things like not lock our vehicles and leave our purse sitting on the front seat or your laptop in the back seat, I love this one. In fact, I'm sure you've seen it. You go to Walmart or Target or something and you see a shopping cart with a lady's purse in it, wide open with a wallet half hanging out, but there's no lady for 20 feet around you. So I'm not saying anybody deserves to be a victim, but we also don't need to make it quite so easy to choose us as a victim. So pay attention. Put down your phone. Pay attention to people's body language. Who's watching me? When I'm walking, what we call a transitional zone, like from Walmart to my car, from my listing to my car, those are all transitional zones. That's what criminals are looking for, because that's a good opportunity for them. Once you're in your car, they can't do much. While you're inside Walmart, they can't do much. It's that transition between the two. And if I'm walking out to my car in Walmart, hey, just got 50 cents off bananas, I'm not paying attention to my surroundings. And I want you to start looking at who's not looking. So the next time you stop at a 7-Eleven for a coffee or gas, or the next time you stop by Target, I want you to just look around at the other people and how many of them are not paying attention. And just pretend for a second, put on your criminal hat If I was a bad guy trying to pick somebody to steal their purse, who would I pick? And you'll start seeing things over and over and over. And what you need to do is realize, if that's what I would pick, like if I needed $100 to feed my family in the next 5 minutes, the quickest way is just grab somebody's purse, right?
Yeah.
If that is the person that I would pick if I needed to be a bad guy, maybe I shouldn't look like that person in my day-to-day activity, because that's who the bad guys are picking.
Right.
And when I say bad guy, remember that could be bad girl, that could be bad kid, it could be bad old person. It's not an age thing. It's not a sex thing. It really is anybody. You've got to be on your guard.
So be aware, be on guard, trust your intuition.
Yep. Verify who you're meeting. I have no problem, especially like with my own rental properties. I am a property manager. I'm a real estate agent, but I self-manage my own properties. So I'm a little extra picky about my own tenants. So I'm taking those extra steps. I'm logging into Facebook and trying to find their profile. I'm looking to see what kind of things they're posting. If half their pictures have to do with them partying, maybe that's not who I want in my property. So I'm looking at those things. But ask for ID, ask for a driver's license. If somebody says, hey, can you show me this? I want to see your rental. Say, sure, but I need to verify who you are before I set an appointment. And for some people, they're weirded out by that. They don't want to ask for ID. But I want you to think about this. The last time you went to buy a car, I don't care if it was yesterday or 20 years ago, what did the dealer ask you for?
Your license before you got the dealer plate, right?
Yeah, you can't even touch this old used Hyundai without your driver's license. But you expect me to let you into somebody's home that they live in with children around and their belongings and not verifying who you are?
Sure.
I think it's ridiculous that we don't in this industry.
Now, Andy, I know there's some apps, and I'm struggling to come up with the name of the one. I saw one about a year ago. I think it was at NARC, the NAR convention. But there's an app that you can basically have your client download, and then they upload a photo of their state-issued ID into the app. So it basically, it keeps track of all your home showings. Do you rely on any tools like that when you teach? Like, is there any app or website or anything that can make this, I guess, more comfortable for people who might have some apprehension? Like, it gives them a different reason to be getting that photo ID?
So far, I have not started using any of them. Nobody's convinced me yet that the apps are a great tool. And most of them have the thing like, oh, if you're getting attacked, push this button 5 times. Is the lighting okay? My light just went off in here. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, it's fine.
Must have been on a timer or something. But the apps that are like, push this button 5 times, and then it'll call your husband, and if your husband doesn't know what's going on, he can call the cops. I think those are absolutely ridiculous. Because for starters, if you usually do not know that you're in an attack situation until you've already been attacked. So somebody's already sucker punched me. That's how I know I'm being attacked, is I've already been attacked. They don't stand back and say, hey lady, here I come. I'm going to attack you now. It just happens. So probably your phone's already dropped and shattered into a million pieces because you were caught by surprise, or the bad guy is taking your phone away from you, or the bad guy is grabbing your wrist and trying to drag you somewhere. The last thing that you have the ability to do is push some little teeny tiny button on your phone 5 times. The other thing is, when we get into a fight or flight situation, if you remember back to like 4th grade biology, the lion and the gazelle and the plains of Africa, fight or flight is actually an adrenaline dump. And one of the things we get an adrenaline dump is all the blood leaves our extremities, our fingertips. All of our blood goes to our large muscle groups, like our biceps and our legs. We're getting physically prepared to run away or to fight. So our blood leaves our extremities. What that leaves you with is fingers that cannot do fine motor skills. So even something as simple as dialing 911 or pushing this button on your phone, you'd be surprised you can't do it because your hands are shaking so much. You've literally turned into like Coco the gorilla, who is just prepared to run or fight. And the other part of that is when your emotional level goes up, when your fear level goes up, your intelligence goes down, because we've gone back to that base fight or flight response. We don't need to solve complex equations. We need to punch or run. So our brain actually shuts down to find skills. So something as simple as pushing a button or dialing 911 really does become both a physical and a mental challenge, because our body is right now geared to do something different. Does that make sense?
It does. I was thinking more along the lines of something you can use in a controlled environment to, like, for example, I would, if I had never met with a client and they were meeting with one of my team members, or the team member hadn't met with them, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll set the showing up. Can you just go ahead and text me a picture of your driver's license so I can let the seller know that who's going to be there? And
Which is what I've always done.
It was an excuse for me to get a filed picture of that person in case they were to attack my buyer's agent, who was a really attractive middle-aged woman, right? And yeah. I imagine, and one of the apps that I saw actually had, it was in order to see this home, text a selfie or your driver's license to this number, and then that's what triggered the appointment. So it was a lead capture tool, but it also like took their driver's license and a headshot to make sure that they, it was actually that person, not just a photo of the license. And I wish I could remember the name of it. But anyways, there are some apps out there that before you could be in that, it's preemptive. So before you get in that situation, like, and you'll have to look, and we'll try to put some links below, but especially if you're not comfortable just saying, I need your driver's license, because you could be anybody. Like that's a hard thing when you're trying to build trust and rapport in a new relationship. I think the reason most people are apprehensive, it's like, well, hell, I'm losing ground already and I'm just getting started with this person. I can't tell them that I just don't trust them, because I'm asking them to trust me to guide them through a transaction. So I get, like, it's kind of a paradoxical situation. Like, I understand it, but anyways, we'll try to link to some of those things if we find any. Andy, I know you brought some stuff that.
I think it's in how you present it. If you say, hey, this might be weird and maybe nobody's ever asked before, but I need your driver's license before I can show you this house. That sounds weird, as opposed to just, hey, cool, I'm so excited. Before we go, it's my office policy. I just need to grab a quick picture of your driver's license and send it back to the office.
Right.
Office policy.
That's pretty much how we presented it, and nobody really ever balked. They're like, really? Okay. And
yep. I do it at my open houses. I do it at everything. And if somebody kind of questions, why it's for, just say, oh, it's for the security of our seller. If you were selling, wouldn't you want to make sure we were checking out who came into your home?
Yeah.
And if here's the whole thing. If it's a real customer, they're going to go, okay.
That's right.
If it's somebody who's up to no good, they're the one, what do you need that for? So the real customers have no problem with it. When I am really serious about buying a car, I walk onto the lot going, here's my license. Can I drive it? I already have my license pulled out because I know they're going to need it.
Yep.
When I'm just tire kicking, I'm like, nah.
So I know you had some stuff that you wanted to share. Do you want to jump to that now, or just continue with kind of?
We can just keep chatting if you want.
Okay, sounds good.
So what are some other good things? I'm real big. It's funny because at the end of class, when I teach a class, one of the things I always like to ask is, what's one or two takeaways? What's the one thing you really learned today that you're going to go home and start implementing that's different than what you've been doing? And the one that surprises me that they say over and over and over and over is about parking. Because I teach in class, don't pull into the driveway because somebody could pull in behind you and block you in.
True.
If you must pull into the driveway, because sometimes you can't park on the street, it's busy street or something, back in so that if somebody was trying to attack you, you can get away. Listen, I'm driving across 3 people's front yards if that's what it takes to get away. And that is way easier to do in forward than it is in reverse. Even with the backup camera. My backup camera is a little crooked anyway, so you think you're going straight, but you're a little bit off. So forward is definitely easier. So back in if you need to. I prefer parking in the street when you can. And I prefer my driver's side door to be facing the front door of the house, so that if I needed to get away quickly, I'm going straight for my driver's side door. I don't have to run around the car. I don't know if you've ever tried to actually do the Bo Duke across the hood of your car. It's not as easy as it looks.
It wouldn't be as easy. I drive a 3500, so I have to jump pretty high to get to the hood to begin with.
Well, I drive Jeep Wranglers that are lifted, so
yeah.
And I can't jump, so it's a bad combination.
You
But when I was
you can
younger,
slide underneath, then you have the clearance.
probably. When I was younger, I tried it once on when I used to have a Dodge. It's not as easy as it looks. They practice a lot to do that stunt. But, pay attention to where you're parking. And are there any obstacles between the house and the car, like a mailbox or a fountain or anything? Because remember, when you're stressed, your brain level is going to cut in half. So you really will trip over stuff that was there 5 minutes ago, you just forgot. So parking, if you're a cul-de-sac or a dead end, don't park pointed towards the dead end or the cul-de-sac. Go ahead and do the circle first and be pointed out of the neighborhood if you need to. While we're talking about that, one of the things, this is how we all get around now. This is our maps, right?
Yeah.
We don't carry maps anymore. The challenge with this is we put our address in and hit go, and all it tells us is in a half a mile, you're going to take a right. It doesn't tell us what's next. So you could be heading into a neighborhood that maybe you don't want to be in. You could be heading into a dead-end street and you don't even realize it. Because what we used to do is we would open up the map book and we would look, okay, we're going, that's a dead end. Maybe I'm going to be careful there. But with the navigation now, we don't see the big picture. All we know is what's the next turn. So I still want you to look at a map or zoom out on your navigation so you can see the big picture of where you're going, and maybe not go there alone if you're not paying attention. Listen, there's parts of town I won't go to alone. I know where they are. In my city, if somebody calls me and says, hey, are you interested in buying a house on such and such street? I can say yes or no just by them telling me the street. But if it's some of the other surrounding cities that I'm not as familiar with, I don't know it that well. But there's things you can do before you even go. Pull up a map. Pull up, is it crimemapping.com?
Yeah.
Is that the site?
I think
so you can actually put in an address and draw a circle around it, and it'll show you all the crimes that have occurred there and what crimes they were.
It's really comprehensive too. Like here in this market, like I was doing research from basically cities all up the eastern Appalachian range, because I was moving from Hawaii to somewhere in Appalachia. I knew I wanted to be back here. And I was shocked at how quickly that's updated. So like if there's even a nonviolent crime that happened last night, like a larceny or, just a simple, like a nonviolent crime, it seems to be updated like at least every few days. I don't know if it's certainly not in real time, but it's shockingly quick.
Now, I'm not saying pull up the map and there was one crime in there, so it's a bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
Every neighborhood has crimes, period.
Yeah, sure.
But if all of a sudden you see 100 of them all clustered right around the house you're going to look at, that might be something we want to watch. I bought a house last year. It was a really sad situation. It was an older lady. Her son had moved in, and then had moved in some of his druggy friends with him. And not only were they not, when I say son, he was like in his 40s. Not only were they not paying any rent or bills to live there, but they were kind of extorting mom and saying, pay us and we'll leave you alone. So there were son and 2 druggies and mom all living there. The daughter called me and we got a deal worked out on it. But she's like, well, I can't evict my brother. What do you... So I agreed to take it and deal with the problems. But we showed up for starters, on my way there, I get a call that the police are at the house, because big nightmare. We ended up having the police at this house twice, so this tells you what its background was. But what I did is I basically paid them to leave. I said, listen, tomorrow I'm giving money to the attorney to evict you, or you can have the money and be out by tomorrow at 5 p.m. and I'll give you the money. So the police were there when I did the cash for keys. And the cop pulled me aside and she goes, well, two things. One, they're just going to go spend that money on drugs. I'm like, not my problem. They're out of my house. I can't help what they do. One way or the other, they're getting out of this house. But she also said, make sure you warn your workers to wear gloves, because we know this house very well. We've been here many, many, many times. And then when the house was almost done with the rehab, right towards the end, two of the guys that were working at the house got in a little tiff with each other. So the cops were called again. I came out. And as the cops are trying to work all this out, one of them goes, do you mind if we come in and look around? And I said, no, come on. I said, do you remember what it looked like before? He goes, oh yeah, we were at this house plenty of times. I know what it looked like before. And they walked in and they were just, oh, this is so gorgeous. And they actually turned to me and said, thank you.
That's cool. So what are the other, I guess one of the things that I'm thinking about, just things that I've done, and I haven't been through your training, but one of the things that I'm always cognizant of, especially in those rental neighborhoods, like where people are literally picking up rent checks with sidearms. I don't do a ton of business there, but I
don't
certainly
know.
have. Like one of the first houses I bought was in one of those neighborhoods. I mean, and quite honestly, as a new investor then, it was so tempting to buy a house for $10,000 and flip it for 20 in a day or two. I went into the neighborhood. Like, who doesn't want to make 10 grand in a day to wholesale to a landlord, right? Mm-hmm. So I was in those situations. What I always made, I carry to me, a pocket knife is a tool. I have one with me at all times. Like I don't consider myself armed, but I know it's there. Like, it can be a tool it can be a self-defense tool if I need it to be. But I would always hold the door for people, let them go first, insist that they go first, which can be disguised as being polite, and especially in the South, even expected. But I never wanted to I didn't want to go into the house first, because I don't know what's in there, but I also don't want them behind me where I'm limited in what I can observe. Yep. Same thing with like stairwells, when you're going into the basement, going upstairs, going around corners. Like, I would just make sure in those situations that I would be like, oh, okay, so this is the living room? And then I would just pause. And the body language they would lead. You can steer people around using body language, and you can influence them physically to do whatever you want them to. And I found that I would always send them through first in those types of neighborhoods especially. And that way I knew I was in more control in the situation. If they went to make a move, I was in more control. I'm just thinking of other things that I did. Like, I would leave the window like about halfway down or all the way down, and I've got a really well-trained dog that if I make a certain two-tone whistle, or like a two-tone like beep beep on a whistle, or if I whistle, means go. It means get your ass to me right now. And even if he wasn't he's not an attack dog, but he's an alpha dog, and he grows about 3 inches when he bristles. So I knew that I could, like, he was there. The thing you said about having like the driver's door, street parking, driver's door toward the house. So if I ever had to get, if I was running back to the truck, it's one beep on the key fob instead of two, because it's just unlocking the driver's door. Just things like that. Like for me, I came from a law enforcement background. So when I get out of a car, I'm assessing the situation. I'm looking, are any curtains being pulled aside on the top floor? Like, who's watching me? And I'm looking at kind of the overall picture of what I'm about to walk into. And there was the one situation it was safe. It was a gentleman I was helping him do a short sale on his home, because he went through a divorce and they had to do a short sale. And he had gotten out of jail and was staying with friends. I didn't want to go to the neighborhood. I wasn't doing business in that neighborhood, but he had nowhere else to go. So he was on the front porch and everything was good. It was mid-afternoon until the Suburban pulled up, right? And this is like limo tent, 26-inch wheels, and guys jumped out, obviously armed. You could see under their clothing they were armed. And racism's a two-way street. Unfortunately, it still exists, but it exists both ways. And it was obvious, like I was in a neighborhood they didn't want me to be in, and they just immediately went, like, it was only verbal. But had I reacted, that would have escalated really quickly. And in that situation, like the dynamic changed really quickly. And I went from having a friendly conversation on a porch to being in self-defense mode. Well, in that case, my back went against the railing. I counted them. I made sure, like, I knew that 3 of the 4 were armed, and there was a pit bull, but he was in the vehicle. And the next step I was thinking is, okay, make your exit, keep your mouth shut and stay alive, right? Because they were trying to escalate it, and they were pushing me. And I just slowly, I just started to walk backwards and move back toward the truck. And I stood my ground. I stayed facing them. I didn't engage with, in their verbal, what they were trying to turn into a verbal altercation. And I got back to the truck and it went on. But there's things like that. Like that was a situation where I had no clue that was going to happen. They pulled up and, they were obviously on drugs and looking for trouble at the time. And I was just trying to help his cousin. Like, I didn't have a problem with him at all. But I guess just kind of underscoring everything you said, like, be aware of your environment, be aware of what's happening outside the house. What can you tell when you look at a place? Like, you can tell a lot about a home by looking at it, and potentially what might be waiting for you there. And I think that, I would say the most dangerous job in real estate, at least in my experience, is probably property management. Like the people because a lot of folks who are going to start trouble, they don't use, most of them in my experience, they're not using bank accounts. They're making partial payments, maybe $100 this week and $200 next week. And someone has to go out there and get that. And especially in the wintertime when it's dark at 20 minutes after 5 up here, you're going in the dark to collect rents a lot of times because that person gets off work, gets paid, and then asks you to come to them to get the rent because they don't have a car. And property managers, I think, probably have, it's amazing to me I'm grateful for them for what they're willing to do for the 10 or 12% that they get paid. But so you said that after classes, like, you've been surprised at some of the things that people say. One of them was parking, and we went relatively wide on that one. What's another thing that you're like, wow, I didn't think people would take that away from everything we talked about?
Believe it or not, the paying attention.
Yeah.
When you're walking through a parking lot with your eyes on your phone, you are a target. It's all about the body language, the message. In our body language class, we actually teach 2 things. One is how to read somebody else's body language, but the second part of it is what messages are you sending body language wise? Because we can be very, hunched over and walking very meekly, and how a criminal reads that is you're very submissive. You're probably going to do whatever I tell you to do. If I say, give me your purse, get in my car, you're probably, okay, please don't hurt me. As opposed to, head up, shoulders back, walking with a brisk pace, like you have a purpose, you know where you're going, you're confident, you're making eye contact, you're paying attention around you. Criminals don't want that.
Like so eye contact is like, and it's funny, and I'll just say it. I believe most criminals are weak. Like there's certainly more productive ways to get ahead in life than what they're doing. And if you just show strength, a lot of times, and you, again, use your head here, because if they're armed, then you're being an alpha and you're really, really strong. That's going to trigger that response in them too, and they're going to be significant real quick. So you've got to use your discretion here, but like, especially with females, and I've done this with several, like with friends, I'm like, listen, when we walk down the street, look them in the eye. And it's amazing how many, even men that are obviously have a physical advantage, they will not make eye contact with a woman who's looking directly at them. And it's amazing. I mean, you can diffuse a lot of situations because it's like, oh crap, that one's like she's gonna fight and claw, and like, they know they have a fight on their hands. So simply eye contact is so important. And what I find is body language is 90% of communication. When you make eye contact with the kind of person you want to do business with, they look at you and they have a direct conversation. When you make eye contact with someone and they're nervous, in my experience, they're usually either lying or there's some malice somewhere in their intentions. And again, that's where you can use body language, and your intuition is going to go, whoop, this one's wrong, walk away. But something as simple as eye contact can be such a good tool. Like, a lot of folks, I think, are thinking, well, we don't want to carry a gun just to go show a house, and you don't really have to. Like, it can be. There are situations where people need them, but in most cases, a strong presence and eye contact will tell you everything you need to know before you get in a position where you can be physically attacked.
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple things with deciding to carry a firearm or not. And I am a firearms instructor. My husband is too. I run a ladies shooting group down here in Orlando. I grew up, my family owned a gun store, so I've been around firearms all my life. So to me, it's second nature, but I know that's not everybody.
Yeah.
And when somebody asks me, should I get a gun? I always ask them two questions. Number one is, do you 100% know up here and here that you could point it at another human being and squeeze the trigger?
And more importantly, live with those consequences.
Yeah. And if the answer to that question is, I don't know if I could or not, then don't carry it.
Right.
It's absolutely, we've all heard, don't carry a gun, the bad guy will just take it away from you and use it on you. And the answer is, if you hesitate, yes,
right,
he will take it away from you. If you don't hesitate, he can't. So if you don't 100% know that you could do it, don't do it. And the second part of that is, if you passed part one and you've decided you want to, you've got to train. The stupid little 3-hour class or whatever that your state makes you take, which some states don't even require anything, that class does not prepare you for the true day-to-day mental and physical parts of carrying a firearm.
No.
It's, we do so much scenario-based. Even though I am an instructor, I go to probably 4 or 5 other people's classes a year where I sign up as a student and go. I do a lot of training with law enforcement and SWAT. I do a lot of training with retired military. We actually do more training in situationals than we do going to the range and actually live fire training. I can sink more real world knowledge into your head using a pink rubber gun in an office space like this for an hour than you could learn in 10 hours at the range shooting at a piece of paper.
Yep.
Because we set up scenarios. Okay, you're standing at the ATM and somebody's trying to come up behind you and wants your wallet. What do you do? And we make you stop and think about that. Because if you've never been in that situation and then all of a sudden you find yourself in that situation, you have no memory to go back and pull, what do I do from? But if you've acted that out in safe, supervised scenario-based training and you've gone through all the different what ifs, what if that ever happens, your brain can go, oh yeah, we talked about that. These are my 3 options. Which one do I do? Whatever you decide to do, you've got to train with it. You've got to do, we do weird training. We train from the ground. We train from a chair. We train from, if somebody's pushed you to the ground, you need to be able to shoot or fight back from the ground until you can get back up. The fight isn't over just because I got pushed down. But if you've never practiced shooting or fighting back from the ground, you're not going to know what to do.
Right.
So you've got to commit. We say at least once a month training. And when I say training, that does not mean shooting at a round piece of paper.
Yep.
So.
One of the things we haven't talked about is And this is really, I guess, probably more for the realtors who are watching. So let's talk about putting people in your car. And that's something that when I first started in real estate, I had a Jeep, and I invited everybody to get in because I was in West Virginia. And a lot of times we covered 11 counties. So we had, a 200-mile radius of listings in that first company because we were focused like mainly on large parcels of land. So I would have people in my car for hours per day. And I mean, so realtors, it's still common, even here in Virginia, it's really common. Most people will say, meet me at my office, we'll take my car. And that presents a whole different set of safety challenges. So I'm curious, like how much time do you focus on your training, like in the home versus in the office versus in the car? And what's your advice to people who are putting clients in the car, front seat, back seat? Like what's your advice there?
I'm not a real big put them in my car kind of person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different. Like when I was helping my old college roommate find a house, that's different. Hop in, we'll stop and have a drink after. But as a general rule, and some of it's going to depend on where you are, like what you're talking about with spread out rural properties. Here in Orlando, we have awful traffic. So nobody wants to get back in your car and have to make it back to your office to get their vehicle. Now we're at 5:30 traffic. It's so much easier if we're at the last house and you go pick up your kids from gymnastics and I go home to walk the dogs.
Right.
Instead of another hour trying to get back to wherever our vehicles, where we left one. So being in the same car a lot of times is an inconvenience, both to you and to the buyer. So think about that with a timing thing. How close is your office to where the properties are? Maybe instead of meeting at the office, you're going to meet at Starbucks up the street. Or maybe your office has a branch location. Or maybe your mortgage or title company has a location down closer to the listing. But there's other concerns too. Does your insurance know that you're using your vehicle for commercial purposes? Probably not. If somebody was in my vehicle and we got in an accident, would that accident even be covered? Or would insurance say, oh, you didn't tell us you were transporting customers? Same thing with Uber. You've got to have a very specific kind of insurance so you're covered. Most realtors don't have that insurance. So if something ever happened, that could be a problem, a big financial problem.
So your advice is just don't put people in your car for showings.
I'm not and that's a personal thing. Listen, if you're, the person that I'm here co-teaching with, she already talked about that today. She likes people in her car because she likes the control. She likes to be able to hear them, what they're talking about, read their body language. I'm the opposite. Now, and me as a consumer, I don't want to be in no realtor's car. Tim and I want to be apart so we can talk about what we liked about that last house, what we didn't like about the last house. As a consumer, I would rather follow them. Now, it's your business. You can run your business however you want. And one of the biggest things about safety is I can tell you 100 different ideas. Some of them are going to go ding, ding, ding. I'm going to do that one. And some of them you're going to go, that's not me. I'm not ever doing that one. That's fine. Remember at the beginning I said for every one you do, you're going to be that much safer. You've got to pick within your lifestyle, your physical ability to fight back. Like, for example, I take a lot of classes on anti-carjacking. I actually train on what to do if somebody in the back seat pulls a knife on me. These are things I've trained for. If you haven't, maybe you don't want a stranger in your back seat.
Right.
But the more of these things you do, the safer it's going to make you. However, some of them just aren't going to resonate with you. I'll tell you, there's some safety advice out there that I'm like, that might work, but I'm not doing that. That's too much work for me. So you got to pick your battles. Some things you're going to do, some things you're not. If you are going to let them in the car, then I would be absolutely that much more sure that I have vetted them and know that they really are who they say they are. And it's not always the first time. they might come out with you 3 or 4 different occasions trying to get you to drop your guard. And it's that 4th time out that they do the attack. It doesn't necessarily, it's just a stranger, hey, beat you over the head and steal your purse. Some of them are in it for like we used to call it con artist, being a con man where you were trying to con your way. They now have a new term for it. It's called social engineering.
Oh.
So, well, you probably heard the term, but not in, because I started hearing it and I was like, I don't understand. What does that mean? And as people started describing it, I'm like, oh, you mean like a con man? Social engineering is a lot of times on social media where they're trying to get into your life and get wedged in, which is basically what the old-fashioned con man used to do.
Yeah.
So they could be, one of the biggest crimes against real estate agents actually is stalking. And the biggest challenge with stalking is any one thing in itself, they're not doing anything illegal. Ooh, somebody brought you flowers to your office. Ooh. Somebody dropped you off chocolates at your front door. Ooh. Any one thing alone, they're not doing anything illegal. But when you string them all together and you see the pattern, that's where it becomes stalking. It's not normal. And that's why stalking is so hard to get a conviction against, because technically they didn't do anything wrong. Right. And that's the same thing. That's what social engineering is. We're trying to get in, we're trying to get your trust. And then the 4th time we're together is when we do our crime. And that crime can be all kinds of different things. There's scams now. Oh, I know we don't know each other really well, but you know, my kid is sick and I need $2,000 for their medicine. Especially with the elderly, this is happening every single day, where they're getting in, they get your trust and then scam you out of something. So there's different kinds of attacks that we have to be careful of. Financial attacks, even online attacks, phishing. A big one right now in the real estate industry is where they steal somebody's email and then send wiring instructions. Oh, by the way, for your closing, don't send them to that account, send them to this one instead. We gave you the wrong one. And all of a sudden, there goes your $100,000 and you're never getting it back.
Right. So we're coming up on an hour.
There's so much to talk about.
What's that?
There's so much to talk about. We just scratched the surface.
Right. So tell folks how they can learn more about you. I know you have a great blog with a lot of content. You obviously have written the book. So tell folks where they can learn more about your content and courses.
Well, our website is called saferagent.com. Our Facebook and Instagram is also saferagent.com. I post a lot of stuff out on Facebook. I share a lot of things when, like the stories you were talking about with the lady who just got tased in the back by a customer last week. Those types of stories I share anytime I see anything that's out there. So definitely saferagent.com. The book is called The Safer Agent. It's available on Amazon in Kindle version or paperback. I know a lot of your customers, you've already given them a code for the Kindle version.
Right.
So if they haven't activated if you gave them the code but they haven't gone in and claimed it yet, they still need to do that. But it's an easy read. It's going to take them about 2 or 3 hours to read, and there's some really, really good information in there with pictures and diagrams, and it's easy to read.
Okay. So outside of your stuff, like your personal resources, what would you also point people to become more aware and better educated and get what they need to be safer in their day-to-day business? Like, what other resources do you recommend?
There's some books that I really like. One, and some of these might be ones you want to look into too. There's one called The Unthinkable by Amanda Ripley. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one.
I don't know.
She gets very into stories. It's why some people survive when others don't. And she talks about everything from the tsunamis to the flooding in Katrina to the Twin Towers to airplane crashes. Why is it you and I can be sitting right next to each other on an airplane, and when it crashes, I survive and you don't? Other than, something fell on you. But if we both survived the initial crash, why is it that I got out and survived and you didn't? And a lot of it's up here. A lot of it is in In fact, she even writes about, they've done studies that if you watch the safety training on the airplane today, you have a better likelihood of surviving than somebody who, oh, I fly all the time, I don't need to watch it. Because remember when I said go back and find it in your memory when you need it? I've been flying 20 years, I don't need to watch it anymore, I know what they say. But I now need to go back 20 years to remember where the closest exit is. Whereas the person who this is their first time ever flying, who watched the safety briefing, they know the closest exit may not be in front of you. So even something as simple as watching the safety briefing increases your likelihood of surviving.
Okay. That was called The Unthinkable?
The Unthinkable by Amanda Ripley.
All right.
And then the second half of the book, she actually goes into the brain chemistry of why some people are more susceptible to PTSD and different things like that, or more susceptible to freezing. Because in fight or flight, there's actually a third F, and that's freeze. And some people in their DNA, freeze is what they're going to do in an emergency situation. And freeze is the worst thing you can do. You know, it's the old saying, poop or get off the pot, but don't just sit there. Fight or flight. But sitting there is not going to solve anything. So very interesting book. The first half is a lot of stories, and the second half is a lot of very technical, like hippocampus, and she's talking about very technical stuff. Another one that I really like, and you, with your background, you might have heard of it, called Verbal Judo. Verbal Judo. So Verbal Judo actually is law enforcement training. It's a book called Verbal Judo. But it's also a series of seminars and classes that they do. And it's originally for law enforcement. Because if somebody has pulled me over, there's two ways it can go. The cop can be a jerk, you know, hey, do you know why I pulled you over? Which is going to make me immediately defensive, and now we're butting heads.
Right.
Or the cop can approach me in a different manner that I'm going to respond to in a gentler way. So as I'm reading this, well, I say reading, but I'm really listening when I'm in the car. Everything's on audio. But as I'm listening to this, all I could think of is some property managers and real estate salespeople I know, and the interactions that I've heard them have with their customers. And all I could think of was, man, they need to read this book. Because even though it's talking about law enforcement, it's a lot about how the words you choose. You can say the same thing a nice way. That's gonna, you get more flies with honey than vinegar. And that's what this book is all about, is using different word patterns and word choices to get the same response that you want, but in a way that they like you after the exchange instead of hate you. And that's important in sales. That's important with tenants. That's important with sellers. There's a lot of people out there that aren't using the right words. Mm-hmm. And then the last part that I would plug in that I think you really need to learn and study up on to be more successful, and you alluded to it, you said 90% of all communication is actually your body language. It's actually 93. Only 7% of our communication is the actual words we use. The other 93% is your tone of voice, the speed of your voice, and your body language, how you're holding your body. So if I come up to you and I'm crossing my arms and I say, I love you, which one do you believe? Do you believe my words, or do you believe what my body's saying? Yeah. And the father of body language is Dr. Albert Morabian. And what he said is, if there's a conflict between the words and the other 93%, we believe the other 93%. We don't believe the words. And that's a big thing. You might be turning off sellers, you might be turning off potential customers and not even realize it, because we're so focused on saying the right things. Because every seminar we've ever been to, it talks about the scripts, the words you should say. If they say this, then you say that. So we're so focused on the words that we need to say, or we're so focused on, as soon as they're done talking, I'm going to say this, that we've stopped listening to what they're saying, and we might have just completely missed something that would have changed the whole deal. So sometimes you just need to ask the question, so Mr. Seller, what closing date would work best for you? And then just shut up and listen. Well, we really would love to stay through Thanksgiving. Perfect, fine. So if I let you stay through Thanksgiving, is the price going to work? And then just shut up. We're so busy trying to jump ahead and, oh, I'm going to say this because then I'll look smart, like I know what I'm talking about.
So anybody who's watched this has been through Probate Mastery, the course I teach. Like, we focus a lot on body language, and for me, this all comes back to empathy. Like, it's if you are empathetic to the position the person is in, the situation that person is in, it affects how you write letters, how you make phone calls, how you approach them, what your body language is when you show up for the appointment. Like, the better you can understand their mindset. And in a safety sense, this also applies. Like, if a property manager walks up to the door thinking this deadbeat son of a bitch owes me $5,000 and hasn't paid, and I'm here to get it, like, then their energy is completely different. Their body language is completely different. But if they walk up and think, you know what, yes, they made these choices, but they're in a situation that is incredibly hard to overcome. And no matter how mad I get, it's not going to put more money in their pocket. So I'm going to listen to them and see if we can work out a plan to get my $5,000. It is a completely different conversation. And it's in a lot of cases, the difference between something violent or malicious happening and a human connection that could actually result in the outcome that both people really want, right? Like, I want you off my back and I want my money. And you can get it both. But empathy to me is the starting point for that. Like, it's such a powerful lesson that so few people pay attention to. And that's also why I hate scripts. I think real estate scripts are one of the worst things in our industry. It's like passing out rotten food to the industry. It's like no one is getting any favors if you give them a script book. If you teach them how to have an empathetic mindset and ask good questions, like the things you just said, like, if you're using your head, if you have an open mind and a closed mouth, you'll sell 10 times more real estate than you will with a damn script book. And it's about understanding the position they're in. But, and even so in safety, like, if you approach situations different, you're far less likely to get a rise out of somebody who might be triggered by your body language, because you're, like you said earlier, you're clammed up and you're showing fear. You're showing you're scared. You're subordinating yourself as you enter the situation. So, well, I'm going to wrap up. We're trying to keep these.
Actually, write down. I have one more book I want you to write down.
Perfect.
So it's called Captivate.
I'm sorry. What is it?
Captivate.
Captivate. Okay.
By Vanessa Van Edwards. Let me double check, make sure I'm giving you the right title. And in it, she talks a lot about, Captivate, that's right. In it, she talks a lot about body language more in a business, not the safety side, but more of in a business, like at the Chamber of Commerce meetings and stuff like that. But in there, the thing that was really interesting, you do not want to audiobook that one because she has too many, well, she's got pictures and diagrams, and you'll be driving along at 80 miles an hour and she's saying, refer to figure 6.3 to see what I'm talking about, and you can't. But in there, she said that a really good friend of hers once said, listen, you talk too much. You don't ever listen to what somebody's saying. You're just always talking. And she took that to heart, and for an entire week, she decided she wasn't going to talk. She had 3 flashcards. One said yes, one said no, and I forget what the other one said. But she still did everything. She still went to the Chamber of Commerce meeting. She still went to all her normal things. And when people would come up and talk to her, she would answer just using the flashcard. And at the end of it, she said it was hard. She had a very hard time but at the end of it, she actually remembers getting an email from a lady who said, I'd love to go out and get coffee sometime and continue our conversation, because it was such an awesome conversation. I really connected with you and I'd like to get to know you better. Now, was it a conversation? No. Vanessa said 0 words, but this lady felt they had such a great connection, a great conversation. And the reason is because somebody finally was listening instead of talking at you. So many of us, we talk at. Like, we go into a room already knowing what we want to say and what thoughts we want to get out. And we feel if we don't get those words out that we pre-planned, we failed. And sometimes you don't need those words. Just, Mr. Seller, what do you need?
That's right. I'll tell you, they will draw the roadmap for service. Like, all you have to do is follow the map they draw you when you get them engaged.
So that book was a really good one too. So I gave you three books on your reading list.
You guys have 3 books to read for your homework.
4, mine.
4 actually. So we you know where you can find Andy. Obviously you know where you can find us. Andy, any closing words you'd like to share with everybody?
No, if you want to put a link over to my Facebook profile down there when you post.
So, yeah, we'll give you links out, like in the show notes. We'll have the links to your blogs and your book and your Facebook. Do you have a group or just a page?
I have an investing group. I have the safety page. I have an investing group.
Okay, so yeah, we'll link out to that stuff. But guys, if you ever want to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out. Is it okay if people reach out directly to you, Andy?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. So you'll have the links below to do that. And hopefully you found something here today that was kind of new and thought-provoking and valuable to you. Maybe we saved some lives. At least hopefully we kept you guys out of some bad situations. So as always, thanks for being here, and take a look at the other tips from the trainer and Ask the Expert series for more content like this that might help you be safer, more productive, and happier in your real estate business. So, Andy, thanks so much for being with us today.